Steyn. Join me as I do interviews with leaders in the field of artificial intelligence from across the world. We speak about the business relevance of artificial intelligence, and we also speak about the future. Is it to be feared or to be embraced? Please subscribe at my website for updates on future interviews. Today I'm speaking with Dr. Andy Pardoe, a computer science academic, honorary professor at the University of Warwick, where he is the chair of the Deeptech Innovation Centre. He is an author and the founder of Pardoe Ventures that provides guidance and access to funding for artificial intelligence startups. He is the host of the AI Future Show. He is the chief AI officer and chair of Combined Intelligence. You are in for a real treat. Welcome, listen, and enjoy the conversation with me. Andy, thank you so much for joining me and joining the show. I've been wanting to chat to you for a long time, having followed your work on social media for some time. So what I often ask guests on this show is I meet you at a cocktail party, or I'm in a lift with you and I'm saying, so what do you do for a living? How would you answer that question?
Oh, blimey. That's always a bit of a tricky one for me, because I've got so many different things that I do, which I think is just a symptom of me loving to be busy. So I've always had more than one string to my bow, as they say. But so fundamentally, I'm a technologist and have been interested and passionate. I don't really like using the word passionate, but been passionate about artificial intelligence for as long as I can remember. So it's always really been a driving force for me to want to work with artificial intelligence. So I at the moment I have two main hats that I wear. So I'm the Chief AI Officer and Chairman of a full-service tech consultancy called Combined Intelligence. This we set up. I actually set it up with my co-founder, who I actually did my PhD with many years ago, and so we've joined forces and set up Combined Intelligence just at the end of last year, in actual fact, and we are very much focused on helping businesses to adopt artificial intelligence and to help them on their journey of exploring what AI can actually do for their businesses. So that's very much my first hat. My second hat is Pardoe Ventures, which is very much focused on supporting AI startups and the founders of AI companies. And this again provides a range of services to help them understand, both technically and from a business perspective, how they can make a name for themselves and to succeed. And we have a network of advisors and an investor network that can support those founders and help them as they sort of develop and grow. So for me, that's really important, because that's where all the innovation comes from, and that's where a lot of the sort of great new ideas are going to come from. So I'm quite excited to be part of that, and I'm really aligned to that. I'm also the chairman of the Deeptech Innovation Centre at Warwick University. So this is essentially an AI incubator or deep tech incubator for people that are really looking to sort of start the new wave of innovation coming out of Warwick. But it's not just for students, it's available for anyone in the Midlands that have got an interesting idea. So we're just launching that right now, and that's sort of due to start very soon.
Wow, that's a mouthful, as they say.
It is. Probably took more than 5 minutes as an elevator pitch, but
I'm willing to stay in the elevator to hear all of that. Andy, let's maybe start with academia. I mean, you did your PhD, you're still involved, as you just said, with the University of Warwick. And so before we get to the other very exciting stuff, let's maybe start there. What was your PhD on, for instance, and what are you currently doing at university?
Yeah, so my PhD was it was essentially using ultrasound to scan aircraft wings, and it was to detect internal damage in the delaminations of the composite materials of aircrafts, and it was using neural networks to actually create the high resolution imaging of those internal defects. So it was quite an interesting piece of work that was combining both machine learning, ultrasonics, and composite materials. So it was I actually had 3 supervisors in my PhD rather than just the normal one. And it was an interesting experience, and I actually got to go down to Farnborough, where they've got a sort of Harrier wing with known defects in. So I used my system to scan that in and to detect the internal sort of damage of that. So that was my PhD, and it was interesting times because this was sort of 20, 25 years ago, and sort of coming out of university, there were very few companies interested in machine learning and AI. The general opinion was no one believed in it or trusted it. So it was quite a difficult sort of degree to come out of uni with, because no one was actually that interested in it. So it was quite a challenge. And, many of my fellow sort of graduates at the time, were not really able to sort of use their degrees as much as they'd like to in the very early sort of stages of their career. So quite an interesting time, really.
All right. And currently, you did already allude to some of the work at university. I think you're an honorary professor. And so let's stick with the uni for now. Tell us about all the work you're doing there.
Well, so it's interesting. So I've always had sort of close ties with Warwick. So I did my undergrad and then my PhD. I then, sucker for punishment, I went back and did a distance learning MBA a few years later. So I've always had a sort of close relationship with Warwick, and I've been an associate fellow for a while with them, and helping with their graduate recruitment campaigns and helping in that area. I also chair their sort of technology alumni group and network as well. So I've been involved with that. And then it was just really a natural progression to then focus with Warwick more on the AI side of things. So I got a little bit lucky. So I found out that Warwick were interested in actually setting up a innovation centre, and specifically one element of that was around the sort of deep tech and AI. So there was a little bit of luck in finding out about this and connecting with the right person at Warwick, who was leading that, and sort of had a chat with them. And I said, well, this has obviously got my name written all over it. I need to get involved. And it was an interesting time because I'd already started to get involved with the Conception X program at UCL. So I was acting as a mentor for a couple of the startups there. So I was already starting up on the sort of ventures side of things and supporting startups. And I, just because of my long-term relationship with Warwick, I just wanted to do something at Warwick in that space. And, they have the Turing Institute up at Warwick as well. So there's a strong kind of relationship with machine learning at Warwick, and their computer science department are very strong in that area as well. So it just made sense. And, I got very lucky to sort of find that opportunity at the time. And as I say, we're very early stage in launching it. So the official program doesn't really start until September. We've refurbed the old sports centre that I remember to be the innovation centre on campus. So I'm looking forward to when we can all be back and sort of up on campus and sort of getting that up and running. So it's going to be very exciting to sort of start to incubate some of those startups and some of those students that are looking to take their PhDs and turn them into startups. And that's really the core focus of it, is to really help students to explore the opportunity and the potential of being an entrepreneur and seeing how their research might actually serve a business need and how that can help them to explore that as a possible career rather than just going and working for a company, showing them that that is an alternative option, basically. So that's the idea behind the program.
Okay. What I'd like to ask you, sticking with academia, I think AI and related technologies and the future, we can even talk about the so-called singularity. I think it's crossing over many academic fields. I mean, I would assume in the areas of psychology, sociology, theology, and others, future studies. Do you see that enough is happening in academia regarding AI and other technologies when it comes to those other fields that's non-techie, if I can say that?
It's a great question. So I find it's quite an interesting area where you do have many different disciplines having an interest in the field of AI and intelligence in general. And I think while that's great and fantastic and to have all those different opinions, I actually feel, as a computer scientist at heart, I actually feel that well, actually, this is our field. This is ours. We own this, and let us get on with it. So to some degree, I think some of the sort of traditional thinking from a philosophical perspective on intelligence and AI is actually a bit of a distraction, to be honest with you. And I think, but there's also huge benefits as well. So the neuroscience and sort of understanding how the human mind works is massively important to inform computer scientists and data scientists as to how we might model that and sort of, create new algorithms and new models. So I think it's fantastic to have that sort of multidisciplined sort of input into the field, and I think that's great. But I also slightly worry that because some of those disciplines are coming at very different angles and perspectives, that it can confuse things at sometimes. And I think that we have to just be aware of that and understand that certain disciplines are coming at it from a more a slightly different perspective and angle that, while is valid, maybe isn't as high a priority from a computer science perspective when we're trying to implement sort of new types of algorithms. So it's a really interesting one, and I think it will always be the case that there'll be so many different areas that are interested in it, because there are so many implications about it as well. So it's an interesting area, and I think it's just something we have to navigate ourselves through. But by understanding that there are different perspectives, and not all of those perspectives can help us from a computational perspective in terms of advancing artificial intelligence.
Absolutely. That's an interesting answer as well. I'm quite interested myself in how this technology will impact us from a social point of view, from a spiritual, if you would, point of view. I think there will be massive impacts, but I do think you're right. Because if you're a theologian, for instance, or a sociologist, psychologist, I think one can have valid opinions about, for that matter, how any technological change has impacted us and will impact us. But from a computer science point of view, I think it should be driven there, it should be housed there, and the other lenses could hopefully contribute. But we can't really move the focus out of computer science.
Yeah, it's a really difficult topic, because I think if you were to put an ethical lens on this, many people would object to that opinion and say, no, it can't be just computer scientists that are running the show, because then you're going to get into all sorts of sort of challenges and difficulties. And I agree with that as well, right? So I think my previous comment and my previous view was about how do we advance from a academic and theoretical perspective for artificial intelligence. But I think the wider impacts of the use of AI, I think absolutely there's again many more stakeholders in that conversation, and I think it's a really interesting challenge to to help people fully understand what AI is. And there's been a lot of interest in, for example, facial recognition and the application of that in recent, well, for a long time, but it's become quite a hot topic because of the Black Lives Matters sort of campaigns. And, you know, I fully get that, I fully understand that, but I think there's also, we need to be grounded in actually trying to help people understand the technology, understand how the data is being used, understand that actually when these algorithms are made, they're not being made deliberately to have these biases in them. It's a natural consequence of the data that the data scientists have. What we need to do is figure out how do we build the control frameworks around that to minimize the impact and to eradicate those type of data biases that are causing these ethical concerns, right? So it's I fully believe that there needs to be, you know, governance, there needs to be conversations, there need to be different perspectives on the use of the technology. But what we also have to appreciate is every technology can be used for good and bad. So, you know, nuclear, you know, understanding the atom has given us, you know, nuclear fuel, but also nuclear bombs. And, you know, sometimes you can't, unfortunately, you can't have the good without some of the bad. And I think it's how do we manage that risk and deal with that potential concerns and issues. And, you know, this is a very new technology, right? We've only really been sort of exploring this since the 1950s, and for a good chunk of that first sort of 25 years, we didn't really make that much progress. So it's a very new technology. We have to understand how to use it and to build a lot of the capability that everyone is asking us to have, to use the technology safely and wisely and for good. And I think we will get there, and I think there are some growing pains, but let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. Let's make sure we actually give ourselves the time to develop the technology in the right way.
We can do hours on what we're talking about now if it's up to me. I think it's because I love philosophy. It's part of my one of my majors at uni, and to try and connect and theology for that matter. So, but I think you need a good single malt Scotch and a few hours to.
Yeah, I mean, I could talk for probably sort of several days on this. So it's a great topic, and I think how the technology will evolve over time. So I'm very much a futurist from an AI perspective, and I'm excited by not just what's happening right now, but what's going to happen in 10, 20, 30, 40 years time with the technologies. And I think that's when some of these more different perspectives will really come into play, because, you know, are we actually going to be able to create a conscious AI entity at some stage? And for me, that's actually super exciting, right? And I think we will. Yes. But it's, you know, what are the implications of doing that is fascinating.
I want to shift gears a bit to the work you're doing with startups, Andy. I think
Sure.
Because there are people watching this recording who are most likely technically very astute, very excited. I think with all startups, one of the problems is that the business skills to run a startup and a business is not always there, even though they might be some of the smartest technical people you will ever meet.
Sure.
So if somebody is watching this right now and they're excited, they've got a great idea that most likely can work, where do they start and what do they do and what are the pitfalls in your opinion?
Well, and it's a great question, and this is why I set up Pardoe Ventures, because I saw that there's kind of two groups of startups that sort of reach out and I work with. So there'll be the first case that you mentioned, so some really smart technical folks that have got some really great ideas from a technical perspective, but what they're lacking is how to apply that to a business problem. They're lacking that sort of business experience. And so I'm building up a team of advisors that have very specific business capabilities that we can enhance the team and give them the guidance from a business perspective, to sort of fill that initial gap, and to essentially scrutinize their thinking, help them form their thinking, and to help them develop their concepts and their ideas. So often, when I first work with founders, their raw idea is good, but it just needs a bit of tweaking and a bit of thinking about the underlying problems that they need to sort of solve. So one area that I are focused on is providing that sort of business consultancy, if you like, that really helps them develop their ideas from a business and a use case perspective, and to provide that sort of ongoing support. And then there'll be another group of startups that have got that business knowledge and depth of industry experience, but they know their idea needs some AI, but they don't have the first clue about how to build that. So that other group of startups are in that class where they've got a great business idea and they've worked for 10, 20 years in a specific sector, and they know they want to add some AI capability, and they reach out to me for my experience in that space, and I offer help and advice in that side of things as well. So it's really quite interesting, sort of those two different types of startups, and I think both are interesting, both are valid, I think certainly with what's happened with the pandemic, we're going to see a lot more companies created that are looking to sort of leverage AI capabilities over the next sort of couple of years. So I think it's a very interesting time and space to be in working in this industry. So yeah, very exciting.
In the case of the first group that you've mentioned, do you also help facilitate them to acquire the funding they need?
Absolutely. So we have a service that will actually help review their pitch deck and do the due diligence ahead of when an investor would do that, so we can sort of highlight any gaps or issues ahead of time. We'll prep them for interviews and help them and connect them with investors as well. So I've got a network of investors that are interested in AI startups that I can connect my sort of portfolio startups with as well. So yes, definitely the investor side of things we definitely support with as well. And my hope is next year to have our own fund as well that we can sort of allocate ourselves. So that's the ambition for us as well.
Super. I definitely want to get to the books before we end, Andy, but you've already kind of alluded to it in the second group you mentioned, but the work you do in helping businesses, because that's also where I do some work, and I'm fascinated by the lack of knowledge because businesses will say, help us to implement AI, and I would then say, to do what? And that's where the wheels come off often, because they haven't thought it through. But so a little bit about your work there, but also, the typical issues that business leaders have in understanding this technology.
Yeah, I mean, this is a whole new, this could be another podcast in its own right. So it's, and I totally agree with your initial statement that sometimes businesses, they're aware of AI and they sort of say, right, we need some AI, and they don't really know what problem they're trying to solve. And so often people are starting at the wrong end of the sort of equation, if you like. So you need to understand what business problems you have, and then try and figure out what technologies can help solve those problems. So that's, the first thing to mention. So in terms of the challenges for adopting AI, there are a huge number of different challenges, and we've mapped out a 10-step journey, which goes from the very early stage of just interested in AI and using AI and looking at your sort of innovation pipeline and doing a few proof of concepts, going all the way through to being what I would call an AI first company, where you're using AI across your entire value chain, both from a front office and how you interact with your customers, but also in a back office perspective as well. And a lot of the challenges are actually not technical challenges. Some of them are, don't get me wrong, and there's a ton of technical challenges, but there's also a whole range of other challenges along the way. Some of that will be around how you set up your organization to sort of accelerate the adoption of AI. So there's lots of different thinking around that. There's how do you set up your governance and control and ethics around your capability. There's the conflicts that you get as well, because a data science team operates in a very different way to how a normal IT team would. And you can see, and I've seen this in many times, that you'll get conflicts between the data science team and the rest of the IT organization. So there's issues there, for example. There's issues in terms of educating the leadership team and the sort of middle management team about the technology and what it can and can't do. There's the expectations around, well, AI should always work 100%. Well, it's not quite like that. There's the issues around, well, there's an element of experimentation because it's not clear exactly what algorithm and what parameters, and so you have to iterate quite frequently to get the best performance. That's a slightly unusual way of operating for traditional sort of development teams as well. So there's a ton of issues at every stage of the journey, and that's really, you know, what we're, from a combined intelligence perspective, we're looking to help companies to navigate through all of those different challenges and help them to make that sort of journey of adoption a lot smoother. And I think, you know, and sometimes you'll find companies don't appreciate that there's that many different challenges, and then they get halfway and then they get into a real sort of sticky situation where it's like, oh, what do we do next? And for me, that's the most interesting project, to sort of come in and sort of, you know, try and sort that out and sort of get them moving in the right direction. So yeah, there's a ton of challenges, there's a ton of issues, and it's, you know, it's difficult, both from a technical perspective, both from educating the business users, educating the clients, educating the sort of the management team as well. So yeah, there's a ton of challenges.
Before we end off, Andy, just briefly on the I saw on your website 2 books. There might be more. The first one, The Continuum of Intelligence, which I think you wrote by yourself, and then there's the AI book, which is a consortium of authors. Maybe, and both seem interesting, so I've got them on my wish list now. On Amazon. Tell us a bit more about the books, please. So
the AI book is a book that I'm one of many co-authors on. So I wrote a chapter in that book, and there's many chapters. So there's a whole bunch of co-authors on that, and it's very much focused on fintech and AI. So I spent 20 years working in the sort of fintech industry. So I've got a ton of experience working in that space, and so I was asked to write a chapter which is more on the sort of future use of AI in the fintech space. So for me, that was an interesting sort of area to sort of focus on. And yeah, the book was published a couple of months ago, I believe, so you can actually order that now from Amazon, which is great. And I think the organisers of the book, which is the FinTech Circle, they're planning, well, we were going to have a launch event a few months ago. Of course, that didn't happen with the virus, but I think we're planning something towards the end of the year. So there'll be a sort of mini one-day conference, and hopefully we can all sort of get together and celebrate the launch of the book. So that was super exciting for me to sort of be a co-author on that. My other book, The Continuum of Intelligence, is a long-term passion of mine. It's not yet published, so I'm hoping to get it published next year. And this is, this is something I've been working on for probably about 2 or 3 years now, and it's almost finished. But it's one of those things where there's always more to do on it. But this is really about the journey we need to take as we develop more and more advanced AI, and it sort of talks about that sort of journey going, into the sort of singularity, and what does our future look like sort of when we get there, and what are some of the issues and concerns around that. I'm quite interested in the consciousness aspect of intelligence, and how maybe we've got a slightly incorrect view of what consciousness is, and how I think we should think about it again from a computer science perspective rather than a sort of philosophical sort of perspective. But so that I'm quite interested in as well. So that's my real sort of area that I'm really interested in, is how we will develop those more advanced techniques, and how it will evolve over the next sort of 20-30 years. So for me, that's super exciting. So, and I'm writing the book to help anyone understand more about the topic. So it's not going to be super technical. It will be hopefully an interesting read that anyone who wants to learn more about AI can pick up and read, and sort of see not just where we are, but sort of where it's going as well. So I'm hoping it will be useful as part of the sort of education that we need to do to help people not be so afraid of the technology, to understand it better, and to sort of see what it can and can't do. But I'm taking quite a balanced view, so I'm not hiding some of the challenges and risks that come with the technology. So hopefully it gives a fairly fair view of where it might be.
Well, there's definitely, already as we're speaking, and time permitting in the weeks and months to come, there's at least four more talks I want to have with you. The one is when the book is ready for publication, you must take us through it.
Yes, of course.
Definitely about the world of AI in academia. I think there's so much more to speak about. About startups, I think there's so much more to unpack. And then something that I'm super interested in is the business application, guiding businesses on this journey, which is such a topic. I think it's more a people thing than a technology thing when organizations embark on an AI journey, because I think they start with what is the silver bullet, supposedly called AI. The organization isn't ready, the skills are not ready, the data is a mess, and so forth. So it's really almost taking them back a few steps before they even think about AI. So I think that would be interesting.
Yeah, definitely, and very happy to have those sort of follow-on discussions. So absolutely, and be delighted to sort of delve deeper into each of those topics for sure. Yeah.
I'm going to add your various links to the video comments, Andy, if businesses want to reach out to find out
sure.
how you can help them and so forth. I appreciate your time, and thank you so much. It was a lovely conversation, but I'm just itching to speak more, but we'll get there. Thank you.
No, that's fantastic, and really appreciate the conversation, and very happy to sort of delve deeper into any of those topics. And like I say, I think there's so much to explore with the potential of the technologies and how it's going to change business and the way we sort of live our lives as well. I think we are just seeing the tip of the iceberg at the moment, and there's plenty more opportunities and plenty more amazing things that we'll see over the coming years. So yes, it's a very exciting time to sort of to experience, I think. So yeah, we're very lucky from that perspective.
Super.